And I'm Derrick Day, and this dude is.
I'm Aaron Tomlinson. I'm looking to share this on my page, so let me see if I can find it. Not yet.
You take your time, but this is going to be interesting because while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and set up the premise for tonight's talk.
Please do.
Because we've got some shit going on in the world right now.
Yep.
You know, as Edwin Starr would say, war. Huh. Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely not. Say it again.
Yep.
Yep.
World War III.
Yep. And it's funny. Somebody made a meme that was hilarious. It said, you know, we're able to take our masks off just in time to see the expressions of the people's faces as we go into World War III.
Oh my gosh.
That was just absolutely hilarious, because that is like, you know, where we're headed to. And here's the interesting thing. Let me just say this before I really get into the meat of the discussion.
Yeah.
Is that honestly, it's a no-win situation for the United States.
Yep.
It's a no-win situation, because if we ignore it, then basically Putin will expand himself everywhere. I mean, Ukraine is just the beginning, because Ukraine is like the crown jewel of the old Soviet Republic. But you got Belarus, and you have Georgia, and you have Kazakhstan, and you've got a lot of Eastern Bloc states that Putin would love to march his troops into.
Yep.
So this is like just the beginning. This is the prelude. This is like I'm trying to think of which one of Tchaikovsky's symphonies it was, because I was really feeling Tchaikovsky this week. I don't know, maybe it's kind of this Russian thing, maybe I may have started reading some Dostoevsky too. But anyway, here's the deal. Basically, this is a situation where you have Vladimir Putin, who is an Orthodox Russian Christian.
Yeah.
And he sees himself as the modern day Constantine. Yep. The one that will finally conquer Europe and possibly the world for his brand, his flavor of Christianity. In other words, he's doing what was Trump's wet dream. So here we have this, and here's the thing. I find this funny. People will call guys like you and I, Aaron, communists, because we espouse a lot of left of center views. But here you have a legitimate former communist looking to expand his empire, and the people who call us communists are calling Putin a great man. And it's so funny. But before I get too far down the road, tonight I'm going hard. I'm drinking some Ardbeg single malt scotch.
Ooh.
Just this over ice. And Aaron, I'm telling you, man, I can't wait till we get to hang out together, because I'm going to tell you, I'm actually building up in my office here. I have a wine rack, and now I'm building a bar.
All right.
Well, I'm gonna have a bar. I'm gonna have the wine rack. I've got my humidor set up. I've got my own little fridge in here. And what I'm looking at now is getting somebody to do an air handling system for me, so I can actually smoke cigars in the house.
Oh man! All right.
So, but when we do get to hang out, man, it's gonna be on and popping. So while I'm pouring this, Aaron, I'm gonna go ahead and kick it over to you, and
sure.
and so I can hear what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, sure. So I'm drinking a hard seltzer tonight, so I'm going soft.
Okay.
I wanted a Paloma. And I thought, I don't want to mix my own, because I just don't want to, for whatever reason, I thought I'm going to try to get something pre-mixed. So I got this Jose Cuervo stuff, but I'm disappointed because it's really just a hard seltzer. But it is what it is.
You know, it's funny. I started to go with a wine tonight, but I said, nah, I think I need something a little bit harder.
I thought about that too. I thought, man, this is going to be an interesting subject. So I want to preface it with this. Like, I want to approach tonight's topic tentatively, and here's why, Derrick. Because I didn't serve in the military. I'm not an expert on foreign policy. I'm not an expert on Russia, Russian Orthodoxy, all that stuff. And but I think, you know, I can offer some social commentary. So that's my stance tonight. So, you know, I throw stones at people that became epidemiologists overnight after the pandemic started.
Yeah.
So my take is, and I'll be honest with you. You sent, or I'll be transparent. I don't like I'll be honest with you because that implies that you're not always honest. I'll be transparent with you. You messaged me last night and you're like, let's talk about the religious, you know, how religion is stirring this war. And I thought that came out of left field to me. And so I was like, oh, that's an interesting take. I want to hear more. So I got up this morning and I was, you know, doing my Google searches and whatever. And no shit. Now, this is something I think people might push back on because we're so radically converted from the church, right? That people might think, oh, you're just making this fit your bias or your take or your narrative or whatever, because what we're going to talk about is not on anybody's radar in the West. It certainly wasn't on mine. Now, some of our viewers may be more up to speed on this stuff than me, but I was shocked, Derrick. But the more I dug into it, the more I could see it. So I'm going to give what I learned about the historical background of this as far as Putin goes. And it goes all the way back to the establishment of Russian Orthodoxy in about the 10th century. And, oh gosh, I needed to take notes. But there is, if you look him up, there's a Saint Vladimir that, and you probably can comment on this better than I can, but I'll go ahead and set it up. Saint Vladimir in like 960 or 967, something like that, was given a hand in marriage. He was pagan, but he was given a hand in marriage to a Christian princess if he would convert to Christianity. And so he went to Kiev, however you want to say it, and ordered a mass baptism of basically the entire sort of Russian world into Christian. Oh, my dog. Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's okay. But hey,
you barked at my door. Into Christian faith or Christian Orthodoxy. And that was the birthing of the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, in looking at Vladimir Putin's life, his mom was a Christian, his dad was an atheist, communist. Yep. And she named him Vladimir after this guy. Vladimir. Yeah, after Saint Vladimir. And he's a deeply religious person. There are pictures of him wearing a cross. People that aren't familiar with Eastern Christianity don't realize that Russia and the Ukraine and Romania and Poland and all these areas are deeply Christian, but their ties are not evangelical. Their ties either go back to Catholic movements in the case of Poland or Russian Orthodoxy in the case of the Ukraine and Russia. And so part of Putin's vision, as I understand it, is to restore the glory of a Russian empire, of Mother Russia, united nationally, politically, spiritually, and geographically. So in a very real sense, he sees himself as on a mission from God.
Yep.
And I'll serve it back to you.
And all of that is absolutely correct. And let me throw a couple of other things out there. One is that the whole roots of Eastern Orthodoxy come from a split in the Catholic Church. And I don't remember exactly which council or which where the schism actually happened, but basically the Russian Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox Church basically claimed the primacy of the actual papal throne.
Yeah.
And that basically Constantine fortified this by making Constantinople the titular home of Eastern Orthodoxy.
Right.
So here you have Putin, who is he looks back to that. He draws from that. And interesting fact, a little bit of trivia, is that the Russian monarchy, the titular head of the Russian monarchy is called the Tsar, C-Z-A-R, which is literally Rus for Caesar. Literally, Caesar. That's what Tsar means. It's essentially Russian Caesar. And so there are two things that Putin had issue with. One was that he felt like the dismantling of the Soviet Union was sort of a concession to Russian weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he came to power, it was his desire to basically rebuild the empire, but not as a Soviet empire as it had been, but as you mentioned, this essentially Holy Roman Empire. And this is what he wants. And he sees himself as the next czar. Now, what does all this have to do with anything? Because looking back on war, you can almost pick any war and you can find either a religious causation, a religious correlation, or a religious catalyst. And in virtually any war, pick one. Just name one. World War II, or World War I, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. And this had to do with the establishment of a greater European monarchy, which was centered around the Eastern Church. So, so you have that. World War II, Hitler invading Poland. Hitler was a Christian, and Germany was a state that was largely split between Catholic and Protestant. But Hitler had a vision of uniting Christianity under the banner of the Third Reich, where he would not only be essentially the Führer, but also the father.
Yes.
So he saw himself not just as a political leader, but as a religious leader, and the Civil War, and the War of 1812, and the Revolutionary War, and the French Revolution, and you go all the way back. Now watch this, right? There is a biblical precedent for war. And I didn't look this up, but basically you can go back to the book of Genesis and find your first war. First conflict between nations or tribes. And so whenever war is declared, there is always a religious component that's layered over it, veneered over it, or undergirding it to justify it. In other words, we're good. We are on the side of God here. And I'll tell you how deep this is. After having served 7 years in the United States Navy, and every one of the branches of the armed services of the United States has what they call the chaplain corps. And the chaplain corps is a religious unit. Now, ostensibly, they have someone of virtually every faith that serves in the chaplain corps, but it's really Christian. And let's not mix things up with this. It's largely Christian. And the idea is to keep the faith of the troops in the midst of watching their comrades die. That's the psychological premise behind the chaplaincy. But it's also to say that, they offer prayers asking for victory in battle, prayers asking for mitigation of casualties, prayer along the lines of supplies and all of these things. And all of this is to say somehow that God is on my side.
Right.
And here's the funny thing, you got Christians that are saying, pray for the Ukraine. Well, first of all, let me tell you something, motherfuckers. Your prayers ain't doing shit. Not a goddamn thing. Because if your prayers can't lift starvation off children in Africa and in Latin America and in other places of the world, India and Pakistan, if your God can't do that, your God has absolutely zero skin in this war thing. And then the other thing is that Ukraine, it happens to be today a hotbed of Protestantism. Did you know that one of the largest churches in the world is in Kiev?
Yeah.
In Ukraine. Sure. And it's pastored by a Nigerian-born pastor, Sunday Adaloja.
Yep.
He has 250,000 members. Now, all this I say is that part of this is that because Ukraine is a hotbed of Protestantism, and this Protestantism lends itself to what we call Western democracy, which is contrary to what Putin wants as empire. Do you see how all of this works together? People say all things work together for good to them that love God. Ain't nothing working together good here. This is a shit show of epic proportions. And what is sad, again, and I'm going to say this and I'll shut up at least for a few minutes, is that you have these Christians here in the United States and in the West, and in the West in general, the evangelicals that believe that this is the opening salvo in the war of Armageddon. And it's so funny because when you look at the life of Jesus had an opportunity. He said, listen, I could call down angels to stop this. And he didn't. Jesus went peacefully to his death. Now, I believe that the book of Revelation has been misinterpreted and has been used as an instrument of war, saying that this Jesus is going to come back with a sword in his hand and a tattoo on his thigh, and he's going to be lopping off heads and blood's going to pour in the streets. This is the wet dream of the evangelical Christian. And I'm here to tell you, that if you're praying, if you're an evangelical and you say, we're praying for the peace of Ukraine, you are a fucking hypocrite. Yeah, I'm saying that. Aaron, you don't have to join in with me here, but this is me, because this is hypocrisy at the highest level. Such an incredible degree of fuckery at play here. And honestly, for you to pray for the people of Ukraine while meanwhile thinking or praying that this is going to usher in the end of days, you're a hypocrite. I told you, man,
Well, dude, there's so much there I could comment on. First thing I want to say is I was thinking about this today. And I wasn't tying it in with praying for Ukraine and all that stuff. Personally, I think there could be some value in humanity sending forth an intention.
Yep. Good vibes.
Building some kind of intention or energy or vibe that might be empowering and work towards a certain end. But if we want to talk about sky God, that's what we talk about, sky, the God out there that's watching over everything and taking care of everything. And I got to thinking about this, Derrick. I got to thinking, how many people throughout history have fantasized or wondered if people knew who Adolf Hitler was going to become and what he was going to do, if they had the opportunity, they would have killed or taken out Adolf Hitler. Sure, you're familiar with that narrative, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it occurred to me, and I think let me build it further. It's a moral argument, right? Like if you knew ahead of time the devastation that he was going to bring on the world, the devastation he was going to bring on Jewish people, and you had the opportunity to take him out. I'm thinking of Stephen King's book, The Dead Zone. The dead zone where you got the crazy president, and the guy's having premonitions, and he sees the future of nuclear war, and so he takes out the president. And we say, oh, that's a good person. That's a moral person. And God is good, and God is moral. And God can certainly cause a heart attack, natural disaster.
Sure.
Anything. And I got to thinking about it. That good moral person that could foresee the future, that could have taken Adolf Hitler out, is a God that everybody's praying to. And he did nothing. Think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, there's debate about this because Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a pacifist.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, there's a story out there that he plotted to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Yep. Now, why would one of God's servants have to plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler if God is the one keeping our heart beating and our lungs breathing? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that whole thing could have been averted by God just taking him out.
Absolutely.
So I was thinking about that today. And while we're on Bible prophecy, and I agree with you, like I hadn't thought about this because I'm so distanced from the dispensational view of Bible prophecy.
Yep.
But I knew it inside and out a few decades ago. They have to be salivating at this. I mean, I don't know if there's any of them still out there. I don't even know if Hal Lindsey is still alive. I don't know if Jack Van Impe is still alive. But
actually, they're both dead, I think.
Tim LaHaye, all those guys that made millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. What about Jack Hagee and his bullshit thing with the 4 blood moons, a few years ago? They have to be salivating. They have to be salivating right now. Now, my exit out of Bible prophecy was a view of the Bible called preterism. And for those that aren't familiar, preterism says that everything Jesus prophesied in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, what's known as the Olivet Discourse, and everything in the book of Revelation was about the historical event of the destruction of the Jewish community in 70 AD. And so from a preterist view, they see all the Bible prophecies as having taken place already in the past, 70 AD. The futurist view says, no, it still has to take place in the future. So I became intellectually convinced of preterism. So I became a preterist in the 90s, actually, before people even knew what preterism was.
Wow.
And I had the opportunity to go to some Nazi-occupied territories and teach a whole conference with some other pastors back in the early 2000s to teach them preterism. I did a giant pastors and leaders conference in Austria. There was one in Poland. And in talking to those people, I discovered something that was shocking to me that I did not know. The undergirding for Nazi Germany within the church and the rise of the Third Reich was actually the preterist view. And this is how they worked it out. In the preterist view, like most people that are preterists, not everybody, I think our friend Simon Yap would be an exception to this because I think he's a pretty strong preterist from reading his posts and stuff. Yep. But most preterists then shifted to a kingdom view where God's kingdom was going to come triumphant. God's Christian kingdom was going to come triumphant on planet Earth, and Jesus was going to put all of his enemies underneath his feet. So watch how this worked in Germany and Nazi Germany and Europe at the time. All the Bible prophecies are fulfilled in the past. Jesus is going to not return until the entire world has become Christianized. Now, this worked in two ways for Hitler. Number one, preterism is built on the fact that God was so enraged, so angry, so full of wrath at that generation of Jewish people because they killed his son, that he poured his wrath out through the Roman Empire on the Jews in the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Yep.
Which then gave birth to religious justification for anti-Semitism, and that the Jews were responsible for killing Christ, that they were the enemies of the church. So this worked into Hitler's narrative and the Nazi narrative that was anti-Semitic, and it worked into the narrative of using military power and force and coercion to advance the cause of Christ, to bring all of God's enemies or Jesus' enemies under his feet. And that's exactly what took root in America, what has taken root in America. All these guys, I guarantee you, I know a lot of them personally. A lot of these prophets that were out there prophesying and got behind Trumpism. Lance Wallnau, for example, Lauren Sanford, for example, Bill Johnson, for example, got behind Trumpism. Chris Valentin got behind Trumpism because it fit with their kingdom narrative of conquest. And so either way you go with the Bible prophecy, you're fucked. Because on the one hand, you're saying, well, this is a fulfillment from the futurist perspective. This is a fulfillment of the book of Revelation. From the preterist perspective, this gives us a divine right to rule in the earth through any means. And so it was absolutely that religious framework that took root in Germany prior to the rise of Nazism was the same exact theological structure that took root in the United States prior to the rise of Donald Trump. Last thing I'll say, since we're talking about Eastern Christianity versus Western Christianity, one of the dividing points, the main dividing point for anybody that cares, I'm a Bible nerd, my Bible nerd is coming out here. For anybody who cares, they divided over an issue called the Filioque, which has to do with a statement in the Nicene Creed about whether the Spirit emanated from the Father or emanated from the Father through the Son. And the Western Church said it emanated from the Father through the Son, and the Eastern Church said no, it emanated from the Father directly. And they split over that. And they split over the book of Revelation and its use in the Bible, because the Eastern Church never fully embraced the book of Revelation as canonical, I think I said that right, as part of the scriptural. You cannot, I'll let you say it. They never embraced it as part of Scripture, and they allowed it. People don't realize this, but the church allowed the book of Revelation into the Bible under the condition that it not be used to teach doctrine, but only be used in worship. So with that, I'll send it back to you, Derrick.
Well, you mentioned something about pre-World War II Germany, and I want to throw this out here too, because the king of the United Germany was called the Kaiser, and Kaiser just happens to be German for Caesar. I mean, can you see a pattern here?
Yeah, right.
It's like, basically, all of these fuckers were of the mindset that somehow they were the reincarnation of the Roman Empire, particularly the Holy Roman Empire, because it was the Holy Roman Empire that actually brought Christianity, that married Christianity to empire. And so, this brought about a whole bunch of craziness, and a lot of this was manifest in some supernatural groups. Like in Germany, they had this thing called the Vril, and the Vril were these people that believed in this. They basically believed in dark magic, black magic, right?
Mhm.
And that somehow they were able to summon this dark energy for the purpose of fulfilling their manifest destiny, which for the German people, this was the establishment of the Aryan people and the march eastward, Lebensraum, right, living room. So all of these things. So one thing I mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to call this out, is Genesis chapter 14, in case anybody's interested. That's the first mention of war in the Bible. Now, I say this because if you are of a theological bent, you know about this principle called the law of first mention. And the law of first mention scripturally basically says that the first time something is mentioned in scripture, that becomes the paradigm for that thing throughout, and it's immutable. There is an immutability that is assigned to the law of first mention. So here we have the first war, and this first war was a war of genocide.
Yeah.
It was intended to wipe out an entire group of people based on some physical characteristic. And all of this, like when you look at that, and you mentioned something about the divine right of rulership, and so there was a medieval manifestation of that brought about the kings of Europe, that brought about the families, the Habsburgs, the Merovingians, and I forget what the original the predecessors to the Windsors were, but it brought about all of that, and it came full circle in the late 80s with a guy named Miles Monroe. And Miles Monroe was really big on this whole kingdom aspect, that there would be no democracy under Christ, that it would just simply be his word, his edict, his rule. That's it. He said it. We revere it. That settles it, kind of thing. And so when you look at, again, you have to look at this whole conflict in Ukraine. And you really have to put I hate to say this because I am so anti-Bible these days that it's almost painful. But you really have to look at this through the lens of the Bible. And what I mean by that, y'all pump your brakes. Don't get your torches and pitchforks at me just yet. I'm not saying that you have to use the Bible to interpret it. You have to use it to kind of see it or see how it developed, because part of the problem is that you got all these wannabe prophets out here that are saying, okay, you have to actually view this through the lens of scripture and view it through the lens of prophecy, and that's not it. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is you have to look at scripture to see how we got here. I mean, It's like basically, if you're driving, you get in your car in Philadelphia and you start driving west, and you really don't think about it, and suddenly you realize you're in Iowa, right? And you have to ask yourself, how did I get here? How did I get here? You have to kind of retrace your steps and retrace your actions and say, okay, I started off going west, and now here I am in Des Moines. And you say, okay, how did I get here? That's the point that I'm saying. And there is a route, a path as to how we got here. This did not happen in a vacuum. And this is so funny too, because somebody posted on my Facebook page, they put up this thing. It was like the bat signal, but with a profile of Trump in it. Saying, I bet they love to have him now.
Oh yeah,
and that made me so fucking upset, because here's the thing: to think that Trump somehow would have any sway over this. Trump is Putin's bitch.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna get that out there, right? So to say that he would do something to stop this is absolutely ludicrous. It's absolutely insane. But this is, again, this is how Western evangelical Christianity views things. That they thought that Trump was God's man, that he was a modern day Cyrus, and that God was going to use him and all of his faults and idiosyncrasies to somehow restore the greatness of the United States, which never existed. But I digress. And so somehow or the other, they think that he was holding Putin in check. Y'all listen, that is not the case. And ladies, please understand, when I say bitch, I'm not talking about woman. I'm talking about somebody who's subordinate to or beneath. I'm not talking about in a sexual standpoint. But this Putin made Trump his bitch. And here's the funny thing is that all of the Republicans now, the modern day Republicans, instead of somebody saying, you know, this is the thing that we feared the most during the Cold War with the expansion of the Soviet Union, this is the thing that we were worried about. This is what we were building up our military for. This is what we were building up our intelligence forces for. This is why we were promoting capitalism in the world. This is why. And here it is happening. And the same people who, you know, that ostensibly would have supported Ronald Reagan, who was the champion of anti-communism, these guys are getting in bed with the actual communists. And actually agreeing with what he's doing. And so not only is Putin, or not only is Trump Putin's bitch, but half the Republicans in leadership are. And this is really a scary thing. And people really need to pay attention because, again, this support for Putin in the United States is not possible without evangelical Christianity and a gross misinterpretation and misapplication of Scripture. It's not possible. But yet and still, just like you're getting in your car in Philadelphia and you head west, you know, and suddenly you're in Des Moines, and you wonder, how did this happen? You know, I never intended to leave Philadelphia. I was just going across town. Here the fuck I am in Des Moines. This is, and I'm using a ridiculous example to illustrate a ridiculous point. This is the thing. You have to look at this and say, how the fuck did we get here?
Yeah. Well, Christianity. Plain and simple. I mean, I've been thinking about this.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this since the last election and that whole crazy cycle. I think, you know, because we're accustomed to evangelical Christianity, which is based, the word evangelical comes from preaching, right? Evangelion, to preach the gospel. It's a Greek word for preach the gospel. So evangelical, the perspective is that we go out and win converts by preaching the gospel. That's a relative newcomer. I mean, you're the new kid on the block in Christian. If you step back and you take a historical look at Christianity, you're the new kid on the block. Because, again, you know, going back to what we said earlier in the program about Saint Vladimir, that was Christianity advanced by conquest. There's a reason you have Russian Orthodoxy, Greek Orthodoxy, Roman Catholic, the Church of England, because church and state were not separate things. They were one and the same. And so the gospel was advanced not through preaching and not through ideas. The gospel was advanced through conquest, through force, and through bloodshed and through wars. So my understanding of the founding fathers was to create a democracy as a complete rejection of what we might call theocracy, the idea that God is ruling. God ruled through, God ruled through the divine right of kings previous to this. And so it's not just government of the people, by the people, for the people. It's a total rejection of theocracy to say that the people should rule. And they came up, with this voting system or whatever that we have, this republic. Mm-hmm. I know people will argue and get lathered up and say, we don't live in a democracy, we live in a republic. But the principle, the founding principle of the Constitution, right, is a complete rejection of theocracy. And mm-hmm. So here's what blows my mind. In the last, 20 years, for sure, we have a almost what I would call rabid group of people who call themselves Christians, who think that they can have fidelity to the kingdom of God, mm-hmm. like you mentioned with Miles Monroe, where God's rule and reign comes into the earth, and fidelity to the Constitution at the same time, when the two are philosophically completely opposite of one another, completely diametrically opposed. And yet we're not thinking clearly enough to realize that that's the case. That's the reason for the separation of church and state, right? Because at the end of the day, fascism depends upon uniformity, conformity, oppression of outside voices, and an authority, a governing authority to bring it all together. Yeah. And that governing authority is almost always, in every case, seen as being theocratic, right? So the stage was perfectly set for American fascism because, absolutely 100% because of American evangelical and charismatic Christianity. They set the table for January 6th.
Yep.
They set the table for Donald Trump. And if they can't see the similarities in philosophies and goals between what the conservatives and the Republicans and the religious right in this country are trying to establish and what's now happening in Russia, they're kidding themselves. The only difference is they might say, well, America would never invade a sovereign nation. But you have to remember, Vladimir Putin has been in power for what, 20 years? Mm-hmm. So the only thing that saved us really was the power of our Constitution to make sure that we had a free and fair election,
right,
and that the results were honored.
Which somebody tried to thwart that. I wonder, my memory is a little rusty.
Yeah. And my wife and I were talking about this a couple nights ago. Like, how can you be a group that opposes Antifa, which literally stands for anti-fascist, and not see the irony in that? Think you're the champion of democracy. Think you're the champion of America. You're fighting for your freedom. You're not fighting for your freedom. You're fighting to empower oppression.
Right. I got to throw something out here because, see, I'm from Detroit, and I'm from the hood, and I know how the game is played because we had pimps, we had hustlers, and we had ballers.
Okay.
And here's the thing: the pimp game is this: I make you believe that you're special, only to break you down and remind you how unspecial you really are.
Wow.
And this is specifically what religion does. Oh, you're precious in the sight of God, but you're a wretch and you're a worm. And the only person that can fix you is God and God's man or God's people. So basically, Christianity has run this elaborate pimp game. And I've said this, I'm on record as saying this, that it isn't the church that learned it from the pimps learned it from the church. the church was the original pimp game.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the reason why these people buy into it is okay, I'm going to say something harsh. If anybody's listening with small children, get your children out of the room because I'm about to say something harsh. Christians are a bunch of hoes.
I want to really highlight something that I said, because I really I want people to get it, and I think our viewers get it, except for those that watch out of curiosity or to out us or to see what kind of outrageous thing we're going to say next, but are beholden to their loyalties with church and faith and whatever. I really want to, like, there was so much in the church. You brought the Cyrus for, Trump was president number 45. So Lance Wallnau went into the Bible and found Isaiah 45, and it was Cyrus. And so he started drawing parallels. That's how simplistic it was, by the way. Just so you know. 45. Well, let's Psalm 4. I mean, I could just see him sitting there. Jeremiah 45, that doesn't seem to fit. Psalm 45, Genesis 45, that didn't work. Isaiah 45, I finally found it. And then he gets excited. Oh, I feel the quickening of the Spirit. And then the next thing you know, it goes on every fucking prophetic show and TBN and all that other stuff, saying that God showed him that just like Trump is, the 45th president, he fits the prophecy of Isaiah 45, and he's the Cyrus anointing, and he's been chosen of God. And then this was back in 2016, they started declaring that he was going to win the election, like God was showing him that. And then, of course, in 2020, they were prophesying that Trump was going to win the election and all that kind of stuff. I want to ask those of you that still are beholden to that view, if you're watching, how does that work exactly? Like, explain to me the chain of events. Like, how does God cause, under a democracy, how does God pick a candidate and then cause, through the democratic process, that candidate to win the election? Like, how does that work, Derrick? Because you guys, your philosophies are so screwed up, because you try to play the victim on it. You think the left is after you. You think the media is after you. You think the secular culture is after you. You try to paint yourselves as the victim. You try to paint yourselves as the martyrs with your fake, false persecution complex that you have, that you need to sustain your momentum. Actually, it's a psychological manipulation needed to sustain momentum. That's why, absolutely why, white supremacy depends upon anti-Semitism more than any other hatred for any other people group, for its sustenance and its power, because it's only by pointing to how the Jewish people who hold all the money and hold all the banking power and hold all the control are able to then victimize you. So in order to unite, you have to be a victim. That is essential. And in evangelical Christianity, that is this persecution, this false persecution complex that you have, is psychological warfare. And it's absolutely 100% essential to your existence. So you sit there and say that you're the minority, that the straight and narrow is the way that leads to life, broad is the path that leads to destruction, and you're one of the remnant. I mean, these same guys, Lance Wallnau, I heard him personally, in person, sitting in the front row in a meeting, preaching remnant theology. We are the remnant. We are the few, the few, the brave, the strong, the proud. All this stuff pumps up your ego and works on a psychological level really, really well. So explain to me how, in a free and fair election, then you can be outnumbered and persecuted on all these other fronts, but somehow God has picked a man, and then through the democratic process, he's going to put that man in a position of power in a nation. Explain to me how that works. Does God just suddenly come over people in the booth? Whoo! I feel the anointing of God. I was gonna vote for. Let's go back a couple elections. I was gonna vote for Barack Obama because he inspired me. But I don't know. Something just took me over, and I voted for Romney, or I was going to vote for Hillary, but something just took me over, and I voted for Donald Trump. Is that how you think it works? And I'm going to tell you right now, you never sat down for 1 second, because I know when I was in that camp, I never sat down for 1 second and worked it out, reverse engineered it. Come on, let's reverse engineer how theocracy and democracy are compatible, because they aren't. So you cannot be a patriotic American who holds to the principles of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and at the same time be a kingdom Jesus is Lord Christian. Because again, the two don't work out, because our government says that it's a government of the people, not a government of God. So when you come in and start saying this is God's chosen man and God's going to put him in power, then God has to somehow circumvent the entire system. So please explain to me, email me, message me. You guys love to message me and email me and comment, and explain to me, reverse engineer this for me, how this works. Did that make sense?
I mean, no, that makes perfect sense, because I ask myself all the time, and you made a mention of something, that this whole thing about saying that, you know, that Christianity is being victimized by the Jews, and that was the basis of the rise of Nazi Germany.
Yep.
And whenever, you know, like when you start talking about the Crusades, like people say, well, the Crusades happened to drive the Muslims out of the Holy Land, but it wasn't just that. The Crusades were anti-Semitic because they wanted to drive the Jews out of the Holy Land as well. Basically, this was a whole thing that was built on Constantine's vision of a divine empire. And so when we fast forward to 2022 and Vladimir Putin, I mean, guys, look this up. It's like Vladimir Putin has a vision, has a nationalist vision of Russia triumphing in Europe, that Russia was preordained from the foundations of the world to rule over Europe. And that this is that moment. Now, let me just say this, why, and this is very important in the big scheme of things. And you know, my wife had pointed this out to me, and I was kicking myself for not seeing this. Mm-hmm. That today, Chinese warplanes flew into Taiwanese airspace. If you think, now understand this, right? The United States, I said this, I alluded to this in the beginning. The United States is in a no-win situation here, because if we do nothing, then we look weak to the rest of the world. And that invites a whole bunch of potential bullshit. Yep. But if we do something, there are several things. One is that the Russians have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them. Mm-hmm. And if they're pressed into a no-win situation, there's nothing to stop them from launching a nuclear attack.
Yep.
The second thing is that the Russians have a different approach to infiltration and espionage. And if you've ever read Sun Tzu's The Art of War, Sun Tzu says that the way to decimate an enemy, the best way to decimate an enemy is not to fight them at all, but to infiltrate them from within. So here, our approach to intelligence is we create spies, and spies go into hostile areas and they assimilate into the general population and gather intelligence. And I would say that the United States is probably the best nation at doing that, in making spies. But the Russians have a different approach. What they do is they will have Russians saying they are leaving Russia because of political persecution. And they bring their entire family over. And and somehow or the other, they magically have $1 million that they're able to establish a business, a liquor store, a funeral parlor, or whatever, right? And so they they actually come into the community adding value. But they're not here because of the because of political persecution. They're here because their intent is to subvert the United States from within. Now, I could go into a whole lot about how espionage works, and we don't have enough time for that. But suffice it to say, the Russians aren't interested in putting up spies to go into the Pentagon, get jobs, and steal information. Fuck, we have our own people that sell secrets to the Russians. You know, it's like the Walker family. The Walker family sold. Let me see if I can explain this very, very tightly, very concisely. When an American nuclear submarine goes into dry dock, they shroud the screw, the propeller on the back of the boat. They shroud it. Why? Because screw technology is essential to the silence of American submarines.
Mm.
And other nations have nuclear submarines. The French have them, the British have them, the Russians have them, and the Chinese have them. I think even India now has nuclear powered submarines. But you know what, though? We can find their submarines. Everybody else's submarines are findable except ours. And so when they shroud the screw, they have armed Marines or private security detail with orders to shoot to kill anybody that tries to look at the screw of the submarine that's in dry dock. It's that deep. The Russians came in and they bought that technology from the Walker family for like $100,000.
Wow.
Their approach to espionage is different than ours.
Wow.
They understand that in America that money talks and bullshit runs a marathon. They understand that. Yeah. So they'll just pay for what they want, and we'll gladly give it up. Why? Because we're a nation of religious hoes. And that's what happens when the hoe gets paid, she gives it up. Or he gives it up. That's what happens. So you know, the whole thing is that the Russians can have sleeper cells over here. They've got liquor stores, they've got, you know, clothing stores, they are working in computer companies, they're doing all these things, and they're adding value to the communities that they live in. And so nobody suspects them. In fact, people love them. But they're going to be the ones that when they read the right words in the New York Times crossword puzzle, or they read the right words on the internet, or they hear the right words in a podcast, boom, sleeper cell comes to life, and now you got a dirty bomb being launched in Times Square. I mean, that's what happens. Okay. So and where am I going with all of this is that basically we have created a vulnerability, a blind side for ourselves that is driven by religion. Because, you know, we'll see these Russians coming over here that they're struggling to overcome oppression. So we're going to extend our Christian brotherhood to them, and we're going to turn a blind eye to what they might actually be. And I'm not saying to be paranoid of foreigners or to be xenophobic. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that basically the Russians understand this. They know how to exploit it. And this is not some grand conspiracy theory, y'all. This is real shit. I mean, don't take my word for it. Go out and look it up for yourself. I mean, the whole concept of sleeper cells and how and the Russian espionage model, it's not rocket science. What they're doing is they're taking advantage of the ostensible good nature of the United States. And they're exploiting that. And so anyway, I say all that to say is that if we attack Russia or try to repel them out of Ukraine, well, then the Russians could either A, launch a nuclear attack, B, activate a sleeper cell, or C, put pressure on Western Europe. In other words, they could start attacking Germany. I mean, what happens if they start attacking Germany, or if they start marching into Poland? What do we do then? And then what happens? What happens then if the Chinese decide, okay, we're going to invade Taiwan, and while we're at it, fuck, let's go into Japan too, right? So now we have a war on two fronts, which we have already demonstrated we're incapable of fighting, and now the whole apparatus comes crashing to the ground because, again, we've been blindsided by religion.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that all makes sense. I mean, because
makes sense to me.
So, damn, the scotch is good. I wish I could taste this.
So I wonder, I'm just going to throw this out at the risk of just causing shockwaves, but
that's what we do, man.
Yeah, I'm bothered by, like, you and I both grew up in the Cold War era, right? Like, we're worried about the Russians, and like I remember Rocky IV. Like, if anybody wants to understand the era we grew up in, watch Rocky IV.
Exactly.
And so, there's all this fear of nuclear war, and our battle was with communism. And so it's hard for me to get my mind around people in my generation and older supporting Putin in this thing, major media outlets, former presidents supporting Putin in this thing. But I have to wonder, Derrick, I'll just throw this out here. For the most part, Russians are white people. Would we be throwing this thing? And you notice how the last administration kept trying to minimize the danger of Russia and Putin, and was always taking shots at China. And I just got to wonder, with all that's been brought to the surface, how much that plays into it. What are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I completely agree with you on that. That basically there is a racial component to this. Because if this were Iraq or Iran or Syria or Ethiopia or Saudi Arabia, I think the action would be swifter and more pointed.
Yeah, I do too.
But here, let me say this, is that I think that that China represents a different case. And the reason why I say that is size matters. and at the end of the day, we have a standing military of about 5 million men and women. China has a standing military of 110 million. The numbers do not favor us at all.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like basically the Chinese could really just kind of throw bodies at it.
Yeah.
And they could say, 10% is an acceptable loss. So, okay, so we have 100 million, we lose 10. Big fucking deal. Because we still got 90 and most of our stuff intact. And the other thing too is that people, I don't think people really pay attention to things. And my wife tells me I overthink things. I think too much, and she's probably right. But I remember when China announced that they were launching human beings into space, and everybody was just kind of like nonchalant about this. But I was like, do you guys understand that they're going to launch these people into space, and they're going to land somewhere in the world, and they're going to go and pick them up. Now, they're not just going to land in some arbitrary place. They're not going to land in some cornfield in Iowa. They're going to land someplace where the Chinese Navy or the Chinese Army can retrieve them without a whole bunch of fanfare. What does that mean? That means that I can put a rocket into space and have it orbit the Earth several times and then land it in a specific place.
Sure.
What that means, what that says to anybody that's paying attention, is that now we have the ability to put a nuclear weapon anywhere in the world.
Sure.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's funny that I think it's either this year, later this year, or early next year, that India will be launching their first men into space. It's already on the docket.
Interesting.
And what that means is that, you know, like India, here's the thing, like India, they have nuclear weapons also. And once you put a spaceship into space and land it in a specific place, that means your targeting is pretty much spot on. So with Russia having the ability, we know that they have a substantial nuclear arsenal. We know that they can launch missiles from air, from land, and from sea. And we also know that because of the nature of Russian espionage, because they have families over here, one of these families probably has a suitcase with a dirty bomb in it.
Sure.
And what happens if we push back on against Russia? There could be consequences. Then of course, then there's the esoteric stuff, because I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with the Steele dossier, but the Steele dossier is that little document from this British reporter that basically said that Vladimir Putin has a P tape of Donald Trump. In other words, that he has a video of some woman peeing on Donald Trump and him enjoying it. Okay, that's what the Steele dossier says. Now, what's funny is that all of these Republicans, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, all of them were against
Don't forget
Donald
Rudy
Trump.
Giuliani.
Oh, Rudy Giuliani, yeah, Marco Rubio, all these guys, they were anti-Trump until that fucker got elected. And after that meeting that Trump had with the Russians in the Oval Office, all of these guys began singing a different tune. Now, I wonder, what do the Russians know about them?
Exactly.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff, and then we found that like there was meddling in the election in 2016. The Russians were behind it. That there was a skimming of bank accounts in the U.S. Basically, they were taking like a half a cent here and a half a cent there from bank accounts, and people wouldn't even notice it because it's like a cent here and a cent there. You're not managing your bank account to that level. I know I don't, and I'm pretty thorough. Right, so you got they're skimming money, and it's the Russians, and they're constantly doing stuff to pick at us, to provoke us, to prod us, and we don't do anything. So here, this Putin going into Ukraine is really just he's already ran all the test cycles. And now he knows that this will work, and then nobody's going to do anything. And here's the thing: Western Europe, they have no interest in doing anything to him because he is the primary source of their oil.
Right.
So it's like it's really a zero win possibility for us.
Yeah.
And it was funny, like my wife was saying something about a a Russian diplomat who, when they were talking about sanctions, that this guy says we already planned for that. We knew it was coming because they did. They knew sanctions were coming. And so if they can hack into our banks, hack into our stock market, hack into the Pentagon, fuck, what it's, we had a chance to rein Putin in. I don't know, maybe when he was elected. I mean, and what people don't understand is that this guy is a former head of the KGB.
Right.
He's no stooge. It's like when you think about this guy who's the former head of the KGB, and do you know that this is another thing I got to say this before I shut up, is that they said that Vladimir Putin may actually be the richest man in the world.
Yeah, I heard that this week.
It said everybody was talking about Elon Musk when he crossed the 200 billion threshold. They said Putin may be worth as much as $500 billion. I mean, when you have that, let me tell you, let me just put this in perspective, right? That if you were to go out on the dark web and try to hire a hitman, you could do that for about 10 grand. For 10 grand, you can have somebody you don't like bumped off, permanently erased. Man, what does $500 billion? Basically, he could throw $1 million at 1 million people.
Yeah, that's insane.
And it's insane. Or 100,000 at 1 million people. I mean, but it's still an astronomical number.
Yeah.
So how do you combat this? But this is the thing that I'll say, and I'm gonna stop here. Is that all of this is a product of the Western religious system, particularly evangelical Christianity, because all of this happens because, who is it that said this, that all it takes for evil to happen is for good men to do nothing?
Yeah.
That's where we are. It's like people who have claimed to be good, claim to hold the moral high ground, that they have chosen to do nothing. Now, I'm going to close with this, and we can start going through the comments after this, or after your closing comments. Is that Sinclair Lewis had said that when fascism comes to America, it will come carrying a cross and draped in the flag.
Absolutely. That was evident January 6th. You got a mob rushing the Capitol building with a bunch of Jesus Save signs in front of them, behind them. Man, yep. That's already come to pass. So I got to go back to the P tape, because I've speculated on that myself. I didn't know about that stuff. That's good information. But apparently Eminem had a pretty sketchy tape on Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani.
I didn't hear about that.
You didn't hear about that? You didn't see that? Yeah. So people were upset that Eminem took a knee during the Super Bowl halftime show. They were outraged, and Rudy Giuliani went on one of those, I don't know if it was OAN, or I don't think it was Fox. It was one of those farther leaning right things. And
yeah,
he was saying, well, if Eminem wants to take a knee, then he can leave the country. Now, here's what bothers me about that. I don't recall them playing the national anthem.
No, the national anthem was not even in the mix there.
Now, there's no doubt that I have no doubt in my mind that Marshall Mathers was taking a knee for out of solidarity with Colin Kaepernick, because he's been very vocal about his position on that, and it was the NFL on the world stage. But at the same time, it's my understanding, like, I didn't follow Tupac, but it's my understanding that Dr. Dre was playing a chorus from a Tupac song when he took a knee. And I know that M greatly respects Tupac. So,
yep.
Who knows why he was taking the knee. But, of course, they had to spin it. So Giuliani goes on there and says, well, if he doesn't like it, he can leave the country. So Eminem did a response, kind of a diss track on Rudy Giuliani. Actually, I think it was Stephen Colbert. It was on the Stephen Colbert show. I don't think Eminem had anything to do with it. But it is freaking hilarious, dude. I'll have to post it in the comments or something.
Oh, cool.
But in that video, it shows Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump getting their freak on.
Like together?
Yeah. It's a ruse. It's a ruse, obviously, but it's hilarious. Yeah. I'll post it. I'll find the link to it and I'll post it in the comments.
Yeah, find the link. I would love to see that.
It's freaking hilarious. It's a cover kind of diss track to Lose Yourself, and it was just awesome, man. So that's my closing comments.
Yeah. So this has been a lot of fun, and here again, guys, listen. I can't say this strongly enough. I cannot say this strongly enough, but religion is not your friend. Religion is not a friend of humanity. Religion is a friend of humanity like slavery is a friend of humanity. Religion is a friend of humanity like COVID is a friend of humanity. Religion is a friend of humanity like AIDS is a friend of humanity. No, these are all things that are designed to destroy people. And that's what religion is. It's designed to either control you, or if you step out of line, to destroy you. Mm-hmm. Let's look at these comments, because I saw some good stuff here. So we had some people saying hi. Juliet said hi. Esther says hi. Josh Bechtel. Josh, thank you for pinging me. Josh pinged me and said, "Hey, are you guys doing Phreology tonight?" Yep, we were doing it. But he says Putin fulfilling Constantine's vision. You got that right. Peter Miller, my friend from Detroit, he lived around the block from me growing up. He said this is Wild War, which I think he means White War, but it's like 7:30 Central, so 8:30 Eastern, which means that Peter is probably getting well into his drinking time. So it may have been a mistype. Esther, thank you for your compliment there. Let's see, who else is here? If you see anything, Aaron, jump right in and
yeah. Mostly just I agree comments and things like that. James Lawrence Gallagher says, quick question: How the hell are people held hostage by the possibility of after death when it is not a fact? Why hold strong to a possibility rather than a fact? There's some irony there. I think he's talking about people being held hostage to this belief that you go to hell if you don't believe a certain way. And he says, why hold strong to a possibility rather than a fact? Because of the emotional impact. Most people don't make decisions based on reason. Most people, at the end of the day, make emotionally driven decisions. That would be my response to that.
Yep, and I think that's a good subject that we haven't actually touched, is the whole afterlife thing.
It's true. We haven't. That would be a great one to do.
Yep, I think that would be a great topic to cover here. Let's see. Esther Amigas, she says, have to agree with you, Derrick. It's shocking. I was once among those Christians who believed that, indeed, who were looking forward to seeing all the bloodshed. That I'm telling you, man, I used to be there. I used to be, and as a former military guy, I used to say, oh boy, like I always think about like the battle hymn of the Republic, right? My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, and it's like, Jesus is going to come, and he's going to, on his big white horse, and he's going to just lop these heads off, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. And yes.
Steve Klassen says, Bob Dylan lyric, God on our side. I've learned to hate the Russians all through my whole life. If another war comes, it's them. We must fight to hate them and to fear them, to run and to hide, and accept it all bravely with God on my side. Wow.
Yeah. Tender heart, she said she loved Dr. Monroe.
Yeah.
I used to love Dr. Moreau too. That was my dude for a while, and then I discovered Andrew Womack, and Andrew Womack was my gateway drug into the grace movement.
I could never stand his voice, dude. I could never listen to him because of his voice. How shallow is that? I'm listening to Gomer Pyle, man. I just can't. I cannot do the Gomer Pyle gospel.
Can I tell you a story? This is how I came about it, because when I used to think about like good preaching, good preaching, I used to think about T.D. Jakes. I think about Rod Parsley, Ron Carpenter, or Eddie Long, or people like that, right? And they had the cadence, they were preaching, and I used to love that. So I was living in Arkansas, and I was getting ready to travel to California, and I'm up ironing a shirt, and I'm in my office, and I'm flipping through the TV channels, and I'm trying to find some good preaching to watch before I get on this airplane, right? And so I can't find anything, but I find this guy sitting in this country background with a plaid flannel shirt on. And he said, on today's broadcast, I'm going to continue my series on a better way to pray. And in this segment, we're entitling this, Hypocrites Love to Pray. And I was like, I'm like, whoa. And I listened, and I'm just like, whoa, mind blown, right?
Yeah.
And I was the same way, because the first time I heard him, I'd seen him before, but it's the same thing, that East Texas accent. I was like, I don't like that, but I listened to him, and I was like, that was the gateway drug into the grace movement for me.
Yeah. He's from southeastern Colorado. I've known about him before he was nationally known. Met him, just briefly. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see who else is looking for some really.
Jeanette says, Derrick, thank you for your service to our country. My dad was in the Navy.
Yeah, I always tell people, I says the Navy, and there's every other branch of the service. I can't say that. Actually, my brother's retired Army. I have one brother that's ex-Navy. Matter of fact, all of my siblings that have served in the military are ex-Army, except for me and my brother Wayne. We both were in the Navy. Christina Osan says the battle was from within. Yep. Doug Wentz said, "Woo, rough stuff."
Yeah.
You got that right. And Marianne says, always a fucking holy war. You got that right. So I put the link up here, by the way, guys. And let me, I'm going to paste it again, just in case, if anybody wants to come on. And
I put the M&M link in there too, for people that are interested in that. Okay. It's funny. It's funnier than crap, man. It's hilarious. It's only a minute and a half long. It's hysterical. Hey. Josiah. Josiah, come here. Hold on.
Troy Cashett, he talked about your Gomer Pyle reference.
Hey.
Golly, Sergeant Corder. Jeanette says, I was taught to respect the military. Civilians don't understand the sacrifices of soldiers. Much love. You know something? Yes and no, Jeanette, because I'll be honest, that as a poor kid from Detroit, that the military represented a way out for me. It was my decision was economic and not patriotic. Now, I became patriotic because of my service, but that was not the driving factor behind doing what I did. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm just, this grand patriot or that I've ever been. I learned a certain amount of patriotism from being in the military, but I'll say this also, that I served, and I can say this with all candor, that I served to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that means that I uphold the right of people to say things that I don't like.
That's great, Derrick. Good stuff, man.
So it looks like nobody wants to join in. I tell you, man, we've got to break the stronghold of shyness in our audience.
Yeah.
And get people to come on and get drunk and cuss and all of that with us.
Yeah. We talked about having some guests on, so we'll get a guest lineup coming at you guys for the future.
Yeah, we already have a couple of people in mind. I know that we talked about Ben Urban, and we talked about was it Doug?
Talked about Doug Wentz. We talked about Daryl Carlson.
Daryl Carlson. Yeah, Doug Wentz. Yeah, so we talked about them, and of course, our many of our usual suspects. People like Kyle Butler and I may try to reach out and see if we can't drag Simon Yap on. Because I think this is like in the wee hours of the night for him, but he'd do it.
He commented, so he was watching tonight. He made a comment.
So yeah, man. So I guess that's pretty much it, Aaron. I don't have anything else. If you don't have anything else, then
I don't.
We can.
It was educational for me. This was an educational time for me. So thank you, Derrick.
Yeah. Oh no, thank you, because I learned a lot. That's the one thing that I love about this thing that we do is that man, I grow in real time.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm hoping that other people watching that they grow in real time too. So until next week.
Hey, I want to get your sister Sandra. I want to get your sister Sandra on too.
Yeah, I would love to get. Oh, hold on. My mother is here. Mom,
is that your mom?
If you click this link, I'm putting this link here, Mom.
Come on, Mom.
I'm going to put this link here. All right. If you click this link, now, hold on. Let me just say this, because I got to say this. I'm going to put my mom on blast here. That my mom is the only human being that I know who can fuck up an iPhone. She's the only one. She's the only one. But Mom, if you want to join, click that link and just follow all the instructions. You can get on, because I would love to have you on.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something. My mom is funny. She's really funny. Y'all think I'm funny. She is hilarious. But come on, Mama. I'm giving you a shot at your 15 minutes here. You see that link? Hang on for a second. Let me do something else here. Hang on for a second. I'm dropping the link in her iPhone too.
She's looking for the link. I see. Oh, okay. That's smart.
Mom, it's if you check your messages in your iPhone, check your text messages, and you could click that. I know you're technologically challenged, baby, but you can do this. Let me give you the kind of encouragement you gave me as a kid. You can do it. Okay, a thumbs up. Come on, Mom, click that link and basically just kind of follow all the instructions. It's not rocket science, baby. You can do it. I'm telling you. I'm really hoping that we could do this.
Yeah, me too.
Because if not, I can get her on as a guest too, because she like I said, my mother.
That'd be fun. That'd be a fun episode, man.
She's hilarious. Mom, you're saying good show, guys. Click the link. Click the fucking link, Mom. Yeah, you see that? People want to hear from you here.
Well, maybe it's true what you said, Derrick, about the iPhone.
No, listen, I'm gonna tell you something, man. It's it's like I think my kids had their first phones when they were like, I don't know, like about 8 or 9 years old, and they've kind of mastered it,
Yeah.
And they've had phones since then. But my mother, it's like technology just, it's funny because like both my brother and I, very technologically savvy, right? And it's amazing that that we come from those loins.
It's a generational thing. Well, I don't know. I'm not throwing stones at anybody when it comes to technology, for sure.
Okay, so I guess my mom's not gonna make it in.
We'll have to get her on as a guest.
Yep. Yeah, we'll have to get her on as a guest. That'll be fun. That'll be fun. Yeah. Because years ago when I was doing talk radio, I did a Mother's Day show and I had her on as my guest, and it was absolute blast.
I bet.
It was funny.
I bet.
Because she told on me on a lot of stuff. So it says, let's see. Doug says, I believe you would have to send the link directly to my email. But I don't know if we send it to your phone, it should work too. So Wendy is saying, call your mom and talk her through it.
I don't know, dude. I think my kids are tearing down my house, so I may have to jump out.
My wife sent me a text too saying that the kids are ordering food, so I don't want to miss that.
Yeah,
so,
let's plan it. Let's plan an episode. We'll figure out Doug's thing and how to get Doug on, and we'll figure out your mom's thing, and we'll bring on some guests. It'll be great.
Yep. It'll be a blast. So, Aaron, anyway, man, I love you, and
love you too, man.
For all the rest of y'all, we love y'all too. Peace and hair grease.
I love that.
All right.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
All right.